Hello, today we're going to talk about the fastest m68k machine, and surprise surprise, it's not any hardware but it's software, the virt machine from QEMU. So what is m68k? It's a CPU architecture and ISA, instruction set architecture, from Motorola, 68,000, 68k. Okay, so this architecture is supported by the Linux kernel. In Arch, m68k, and the machines which are supported are virt, the machine that we are talking about, and apart from virt, the best one is the Mac Q800, Macintosh Quadra 800. QEMU supports Macintosh Quadra 800. How do we search for Q? So Mac model Q800, Arch M68K. There's Q900, 950. So the directory is Mac. virt is for the virt machine, and the second best is in directory Mac, in config. So there's Mac model 2. Quadra 800, Quadra 840, Quadra 900, 950. Okay, so Quadra 800 is the default version that's supported by Debian and was the best machine in QEMU M68K 2 years ago. Since then, the virt machine has been introduced first to the QEMU and then to the Linux kernel. Okay, and Debian has m68k. architecture. It's in ports. It's not an officially supported architecture for the latest version of Debian. So the officially supported architectures are AMD64, AR64, which is ARM, ARM Little Endian, ARM HF. First Raspberry Pis, i386, MIPS Little Endian, 60-bit, 4-bit MIPS Little Endian, so this would be 32-bit MIPS Little Endian. Power from IBM processors and IBM System Z. So m68k is being worked on, but is not a officially supported CPU architecture in Debian. It's an unofficial ports. Okay. And we have an installer kit for ports. This is a directory for the less supported architectures in Debian, including virt, which is another kernel, an alternative to the Linux kernel. Okay, so we have current, and this is the netinst network install. So a small ISO 300 megabytes for the architecture m68k. Okay, and at least NetBSD also supports such a thing. So m68k, Apple Macintosh, for the M800 for the Quadra, for the Q800, is tier 2 support in the NetBSD operating system project. So it's not tier 1, it's tier 2. Okay, so let's see if we can install the latest version of Debian in QEMU using the virt machine, which is the best machine for this CPU architecture, m68k. So the ISO is from March, the day when the Debian 11.0 was released. So first of all, we download the ISO Q3. Okay, but now what do we do after we download the ISO? How do we boot the machine? And for that, the solution is to look at how to install Debian on m68k. There's only one page that is kind of up to date. And that's the information for QEMU. This is the page. So Debian org m68k QEMU system m68k. Okay. So it says in order to install Debian inside a fully emulated QEMU virtual machine, one currently needs to use an out of 3 version QEMU m68k. No, this is old information. This patch was upstreamed inside of QEMU. So both Quadra 800 and virt were upstreamed into QEMU. Okay, so we don't need to build QEMU system m68k. Okay, no need to clone. No need to build. It says we should create a directory named system. Let's do that. So Ctrl-Shift-D, cd latest last mkdir system. Okay, create hard disk images. Already installed. We should create a QCOW file. Okay. I will not create the swap hard disk because the Debian installer already creates a 1 GB swap partition in this on this hard disk. Okay, so it says that we should download the latest netinst m68k ISO, which we just did. So where should we put it in last? In system. Paste. Okay. Then it says that we need to extract the exact kernel and init rd file. Let's do that. So I'm not super user. Okay, done. So in the Debian installer ISO, there's a directory called install, in there a directory called kernels, and then there's just one kernel image in there, which is in my case 5.16, which is the version from March, Debian 11.0. Okay, and I should copy it in the current directory, go. And then there's an initrd in the /install/cd-rom directory. And I should copy it locally, done. Now I can unmount okay, so let's see what files do we have locally. We have the ISO, the QCOW file, initrd, and the Linux kernel. Okay, So it says I should do this. Copy, let's paste this. So it says QEMU system m68k. So for that you will need to install QEMU system m68k, which is, I'm on Ubuntu 22.04, so it's available. It's QEMU system m68k. The same, it's a virtual package. So the name of the deb is actually QEMU system MISC. And has QEMU system for alpha, HPPA, m68k, etc. RISC V, RISC 5. Okay. So let's look at the command line. It's the machine name is Q800, which is a Quadra machine from Mac. Serial will be used for early boot, and it will be shown in the standard input, so in my console terminal. Memory, which is maximum for the Quadra system, 1 gigabyte of RAM. Drive, it has a file which is qcow2, the system file. Okay, initrd, the one that we download, that we extracted from the ISO. The kernel is version 4. The ISO has a different name. Tab to autocomplete. It says console TTISO, so for early boot we use serial console. It will boot from RAM disk. No graphical user interface. Network card with the driver DP83932. No swap. Okay, so that should be it. So this is the command line. Where are you? Let's see what it does. So it put it correctly, so the kernel is correct. And the kernel is the same as the one in the ISO. The ISO boots automatically and starts automatically the Debian console text user interface installer. So we go English, US, American English. So I have already installed everything. So the installer works correctly from start to end. It selects the correct HTTP addresses for HTTP server for the apt repositories. So the apt sources list. You have the option to install a graphical user interface or not. The option to install OpenSSH, which is enabled by default. it does the HCP. It allows you to set it the name of the machine. The current. Okay, it automatically creates the root a what? I didn't find a way to set up sudo, so you need to put a password for the user root. Let's go with root and password root. Root. A administrator user account. Time zone. Okay. In the hard disk partitioning, we go with automatically use the entire disk. So guided use entire disk. Just one hard disk, and this hard disk is SCSI. Yes. All files in one partition, yes, sir. And it creates a swap partition, partition number 3 of 1 gigabyte. So it uses a guessing an Apple partition scheme, not MBR. The first partition is Apple. The second is the root slash ext4. Finish partitioning and write changes to disk, yes. Write the changes, yes. So we need to remember that we'll use the second partition for slash. Okay. So again, if you want to run the m68k Debian ISO in QEMU, you have two options. You have machine Q800 and machine virt. The default is Q800, so we're going to do Q800 for a while, and then we switch to virt. This is the way you specify the machine Q800. We use not QEMU VM. We don't want to create a x86 64 AMD 64 virtual machine. We create a m68k virtual machine. So this is not hypervisoring. It's actual old style virtualization, virtual machines. Okay, the Q800 machine is limited to 1 gigabyte of RAM and has other shortcomings. So it says like this. The most powerful machine emulated by QEMU is Quadra 800. That's in March 2021. This machine is very limited, only 1 GB of RAM and no DMA, just some specific interfaces, whereas Laurent Vivier has added to QEMU another machine, which is the virtual m68k machine. Short name is virt, and is based on the Android simulators interfaces. Has Goldfish real-time clock, Goldfish PIC, Goldfish serial for early boot, 128 virt IO IO buses, serial console, virt GPU, virt IO disk, virt NIC, 9 PFS. So everything for the virt machine is state of the art, except the CPU. And the fact that RAM is limited to under 4 GB of RAM. Okay. So installing takes a while. We're going to kill this install because I already installed and I already have the QCOW2 hard disk. So let's kill this thing. So kill all QEMU minus system minus m68. We look at top. So the virtualization is so resource intensive that it will be on the first position in top. When you run top, the process will be the first one in there, and the process is named QEMU minus system minus m68. Okay. So let's take a QCOW image where I already ran the Debian net installs ISO installer. Okay. And now let's try the instructions to be able to boot it using the other machines of virt, not Q800. So we've installed with Q800 and now we're running it with virt. For that, the instructions are in one of these types of emails from Laurent. Okay, this is the one. Control TV. So it says that it's using Goldfish interfaces defined by Google for Android simulator, defined in here, and I will need to compile my own kernel, because the Q800 kernel that's available by default in the Debian ISO requires a an init.rd, which we do not have, and refuses to boot with on the machine of type virt. So that's why we need to compile the vanilla Linux kernel with these two command lines. Okay, but we can't do that because we need a m68k machine in order to build an m68k Linux kernel. So the solution is not to build it on 32 megahertz machine, but to use a cross compilation. So we cross compile from AMD 64 architecture to m68k architecture. So for that we need to know how to do that in Debian. So I searched how to cross compile the Debian kernel, and this is the page. So I'm not on Debian, I'm on Ubuntu, but still the instructions work okay. So I become a super user. No, in fact, okay, let's see what happens. Copy. Going to install a ton of packages which I don't really use. Okay, let's see if we can run a Debian container on my Ubuntu 22.04 machine. So for that what I use is DistroBox, which is this Git repo. Control D. What is this? Shift T. Okay, DistroBox. How do I install it? Documentation. Okay, so I could install it with sudo, which installs it in /usr/local, or I can install it without sudo into ~.local/bin. So I did this. Okay, I need to make sure that ~.local/bin is in my path. So it's not, but then it's in .profile. So .profile is not used on my system because it's not read by bash if the file bash profile exists, which it does. So I'll source it. And if the directory tilde slash dot local slash bin exists, it prepends it to the path. Okay, so it's in the first position. Okay, next. It will use not Docker but Podman. I have Docker. I have Podman. Okay. Let's list the containers. So I have a Fedora toolbox and a Debian. So let's delete this. How do I do this? RM and then the name. This guy. Yes. And then this guy. So it's still running. It says status up. It says exited 3 seconds ago. I delete it. Yes. And list again. Nothing to see here. Okay. Now I need to create it. I go distro box, create, and I need a name, -i. So there's examples, docker.io, sounds good. Oh, slash, and then the name, and then the version. So Docker Hub, search, Debian, so the image on Docker Hub for Debian 11, the thing that we need from March, is latest. There's no 11.0, there's just 11, which is the same thing as 11.4, which is the same as Bullseye, which is the same as latest. So if you don't specify any version, this will be the one that's going to be used. Okay. Where are you? So I need to say Debian, no version, minus name, Debian latest. Okay, so successfully created. Now I need to enter it. I'm still not root on the hardware machine. Okay, so now this is my hardware machine, 5750GE, which is an AMD CPU, and this is the container which is called Debian latest. In here, I am the same user, so mrsp, and I see my entire home directory. Okay, so now I'm inside of Debian. Let's do the usual. Okay, it says I'm not a super user, so let's do that. Sudo is available. Apt update and apt upgrade. Nothing to install because the Debian container image from Docker Hub is very up to date. Okay, so back to cross-compiling a kernel on Debian. So I have this command line, copy, paste, where are you? Paste, Control U, Control Shift V, m68k, go. So it says that there's no package cross-build essential m68k. Okay. Then what's the name of the package for m68k? Control C, Control D, Control V, m68k. I know what this thing is. Yeah, so the thing is called GCC m68k Linux GNU. Control C, Control T, Debian packages, Control V. So this package exists. It has executables. So /usr/bin, the triplet, so CPU and the other two ones, kernel and userland, so the triplet, and then GCC, R, NM, etc. And then there's a second package which is G++ m68k Linux GNU. If we need C++, but the Linux kernel doesn't use any C++, so C is enough. Let's install this thing. Apt install, paste. Yes. Okay, back to where we were. Okay, so cross build essentials does not exist because m68k is not a officially supported architecture by Debian. So let's install the rest of the packages. Yes. Okay. And then it says that you should clone this Git repo. This Git repo does not really contain the kernel, the Linux kernel. What we want is the real deal Linux kernel. And that's this guy here. And let's see how we clone shallow. So it's git clone depth 1. Okay. So I can exit root. I'm still in the container Debian latest. I'm in last system. I need a build directory in here. Okay, I'm in the build directory. The directory is empty. I'm not root, I'm my regular user. I go git clone --depth, then 1, then the git clone URL, copy, Ctrl+Shift+V. What did I do wrong? Uneven minuses. Ooh, strange characters. Let's go Ctrl+K. Clear git clone --depth 1, Ctrl+Shift+V. Okay. So it should be fast because it doesn't download the entire history of Linux kernel, just the files as they exist now. Okay. Then we need to get back to the best web page for this entire thing, which is this email. So this is the email that we're following. It finished cloning. I need to change into it, and then I have two instructions to run, which is make virt devconfig. Yeah, that's a problem. That's a really big problem. I can't go git GUI. Clean, everything is clean. Okay, that's good. Okay, the problem is we can't go make because make will run the GCC, which is AMD64, and we need to run the GCC, which is for the CPU architecture m68k. So for that we need to find out how we cross-compile. Okay, how do we cross-compile? We need a triplet, which we know. We will not use fake root. We don't create Debian packages. We just want to get a vanilla Git kernel and build just the VM Linux file, nothing else. Okay, so this is not okay. So I need cross-compile Linux kernel. Okay. Okay, so we need this thing. Between make and the target, we need to put this part. Where are you? Copy. So these two command lines become Control C, Control V, Control V. Okay, and the I know doesn't look very correct. So it's this one. Control C without full path. Okay. And the triplet, we saw it previously. It was in USR ls/usrb / something with m68k. In the sandbox, in the distro box, in the Debian container. ls/usr bin m68k, this guy. This is a triplet. Okay. Control V, copy. Control V, Control V, and the architecture is m68k. Okay. And in here I'm going to not wait. So I'm using all 16 cores that I have. Okay. So again, I'm in the git clone of the Linux kernel directory, so the git work directory. The git is clean, git status is clean, and now I go paste. So again I go make virt dev config, but then with the correct cross compile C compilers. Okay, so it says configuration written to .config. What did it really do? Did it work or not? I don't know. Not root. Okay, again, so now I'm in a container of type Debian latest, running on DistroBox, running on Podman, and that's running on my hardware machine, which is Kubuntu 2204. Okay, so max.config, and it says automatically generated file, Linux m68k, correct, correct triplet. So it really looks correct. Says config m68k, yes. I'll exit, Ctrl X, Ctrl C, and advance to the next command to execute, copy, Ctrl-Shift-V, enter. So it compiles the kernel using the cross-compiler toolchain, C compiler, on 16 threads. Okay. So meanwhile, let's look at the system. What we have right now. So we have the ISO, which we don't need anymore. We have the QEMU image. This is the hard disk with 3 partitions. We have a kernel, VM Linux, the kernel for the Q800 Quadra machine. We have the init RD for the net boot ISO, not needed anymore. This we will not use anymore. So the only thing that we will use is the QEMU image and the kernel that we build right now for the machine virt. So inside distro box, so it says LD VM Linux. Okay. So this is the file VM Linux in here. This thing. Okay. And now I can, from inside the container, I can copy it to outside the container. So I'm copying the file F5. Okay. F10. So I can exit the container. Okay. So now we have the kernel which is built for the machine virt, and we have the QEMU image. Let's make another directory in here. Let's make it 0827. Okay, we'll move the only things that we need, which is the image, the QEMU, and the kernel. F6. Okay, F10. CD08. Okay, next. We need the important email, which is this guy, and it says the disk must be installed using the Q800 machine because the Debian installer doesn't want to be used with a kernel that is not the one on the ISO. So we use the ISO with the kernel that was inside of the ISO and the QEMU with the machine Q800. We have finished running the installer. Now we have a hard disk. So this is the hard disk and the kernel. Okay, and says, and then you can run the machine with something like this. So let's copy this entire thing. Copy. Control V. So this is some Microsoft thingy where equals are replaced with something else. So Control R to replace, tab equals. Replace all. Okay, so let's look at this. So it says that the machine can use at most 3.2 gigabytes of memory, so an increase from 1 gigabyte. I'm not sure if this limitation still exists. The kernel crashes with bigger values than this. So we'll see with 3.2, which is this thing. So it says use the architecture m68k, use the machine virt, 3.2 32 gigabytes of RAM. The kernel, which we just built specifically for the machine virt. Then it says console virtual console, the virt IO console. Hard disk is virt, not SDA, not SATA, not SCSI, SCSI. And the second partition. The name of the file is not this one, it's this one. Okay. virt IO net device, which is the best network interface card possible in a virtual machine. The hard disk is the best possible. Random number generator, serial device here and here. GPU device. Virt console again. Virt keyboard, virt mouse. Let's see if it works. Copy. Paste. So it says couldn't bind, root, permission denied, etc, QEMU bridge. So the problem is that the bridge is only allowed to root user. So nobody else can read the bridge, so we need to be super user. So let's go su. Okay. And then copy and paste. Okay. So we have early boot, we have systemd, the kernel is correct, we don't need no initrd. The fact that systemd exists means that the hard disk was mounted correctly. VDA 23, ETH 0, NTP. Everything looks really good. So let's see how it boots. So it says Debian kernel, early console, I should use the virt console and the second partition. Clock goldfish. DMA, CSCI, also. Okay, net 9p, QEMU virt IO mouse and keyboard, Virgil, virt IO GPU, virt IO block device, Goldfish real-time clock. Okay, and then it goes ext4fs, VDA2 mounted file system. So now it has found the first file on the file system, which is /bin/init running. That's systemd. And then we see the welcome message and the output from systemd. The current host name, DTI serial bin FMT file system check journal D udev D the console disks VDA31 swap partition of 1 gigabyte, this guy. If up down, SSH server, okay, so we have two users, one is administrator, or even better, let's use this other thing, or it's the same thing, administrator, Ctrl-Alt-G, okay. The first thing ever is to never use QEMU in any way for input. We're going to use SSH. Okay, so IPA, the IP address ends with 77, exit Ctrl-G to exit grab, Ctrl-Shift-T, SSH, administrator at 192.168.122.77. 192.168.122.77. Why we should not use the QEMU console? Because we cannot copy paste in here, we cannot resize, we cannot scroll, we cannot do anything. All of the goodies that we can do via SSH in a real terminal. Okay, yes. First connection to the machine. My password. Okay, let's terraform the thing. Sudo su. No sudo. Okay. Su minus root. Okay. Root password. Apt update and then apt upgrade. Okay. So minimal amenities. Sudo mc max minus no x. Yes. So the parts that are network bound, downloading, and the parts that are hard disk bound, which is virt.io, move fast enough. And they don't use too much of my CPU on the real hardware machine. But the Q800 machine was way more CPU intensive. So the CPU usage decreases when you switch from Q800 to virt machine. MariaDB in order to run Emacs, which is a text editor. Great. Okay. XIM, MTA, mail transfer agent. Okay, so we're nearing the end of what I wanted to show, but the email thread says that where are you? The main developer working on the virt machine, which is Laurent Vivier, has created a YouTube video starting at minute 38. Where is minute 38? And in here we can see that he really installs a graphical user interface, which is XFCE, on top of this Debian 10 machine running in virt machine on m68k architecture. So graphical user interface is possible. Okay, how does it do that? I don't know, task cell. List tasks, task cell list tasks. Okay, so the task to install is XFCE. How do we do that? XFCE desktop. Install and then task. So absolutely everything works right now. So text user interfaces work, graphical user interfaces will work, apt works, GPG signatures for the packages. .668 files to download. Okay, we're not going to wait for that. How do we install this thing? From here. I am not in that sudoers file. Okay. Root. Task cell. Is there such a thing? Okie dokie. Control G to exit. Clear to clear something. Still does things. Top. Apt-get. PS3. Kilo front end. There's still an apt-get. Okay, Control G to exit. Control C. Where am I? I'm in deb current. Who is this? Okay, you need -A. So it says it's virt and the architecture is m68k and the machine is the current name and the kernel is Linux. Okay, 3.5 gigabytes. df I can have enough space in slash. Okay, and the biggest limitation possible is the CPU. Or not. What is this? 4 gigahertz. So it's 4 gigahertz CPU of type 68040. So 68040 has a max CPU clock of 40 megahertz. So this is really cool. Just one CPU thread. But still, if this is the real speed, then that's okay. You can actually build software with this thing. One CPU core, but as fast CPU core, fast as possible storage, and network. Yeah, quite a deal comparing to hardware machines that are available for 68k, m68k architecture. So this is it. Thank you.